Journalist and writer Uday Khandeparkar calls himself a Munchkin, given his somewhat diminutive size, but his professional career has been anything but that. Having spent much of his journalistic career at the world's leading news agencies, Reuters, Bloomberg, and Dow Jones, in senior positions in India and outside, Uday has had quite the perch on global news, particularly in the world of finance and economy. As a first step to relive some of those years, he has turned out a slim but effervescent memoir titled Memoir of a Munchkin. He spoke to MCR even as he has embarked on his next book about Mumbai's ubiquitous Udupi restaurants as a peg to explore broader cultural trends. Uday Khandeparkar. Welcome to my entire report today. It's a great pleasure to have you.
Thank you. The pleasure is likewise. I
Com-
hope this can be a two-way street because you are more accomplished. You have four different titles: journalist, writer, poet, painter, doodler.
Well, one can have any number of titles because it's all arbitrary, right? I
No,
have
but
done it. So,
yeah,
uh,
wow, that's great.
congratulations on your book. I hope it's being read and received well.
Yes, I've got very good responses from people, good reviews too. It sold a couple of copies internationally too. So, and what people said was it's a very racy read. I mean, it's not like heavy reading.
Yeah,
Well, most people said they finished it in one sitting because
indeed.
their only complaint was it is too damn short.
Exactly. I was coming to that. Speaking of being quick and slim, why the title Memoir of a Munchkin? Tell me a bit more about that.
If you if you see in the start of the book,
Yeah,
I s- you know me, right? You know me
right,
since 1980s.
right,
So I'm small made physically in size,
right,
right?
indeed.
So and when I was young, when I was a boy, I used to be very timid, you know.
Hmm.
So I thought Munchkin sort of described me exactly the way when I was growing up, this
Mhm.
small boy who's, I guess, because I was rather shy and timid, that made me a very good observer of things around me. So if you notice in my book, there are small details going right back to even when I was 6 years old.
Absolutely.
Because I'm just not in the rough and tumble of the other boys. I'm just on the sidelines watching what's happening. And
That's a great vantage point to have.
yeah, it's wonderful because either you're in the hurly burly of things and you're missing a lot of nuggets of life. So
Absolutely.
I guess that's what helped me. You know, eventually I made a livelihood out of writing, as you know, we both been
Right.
journalists. So it worked well for me.
Yeah.
You know, of course I'm not a munchkin anymore, more like more like a rascal, but a
Right.
rascally old man, if you'd like to call it that way.
Indeed.
But
I suppose Amitabh Bachchan is as good a subject as any to start the main part of our conversation.
absolutely.
Let me set up this. Let
Before
me
that,
set
let
up
me
the
tell you.
scene for my viewers. Yeah,
Let
indeed.
me.
Yeah, I'm going to display it on my during
Okay,
the
cool.
editing time.
Right.
Let me set up the scene with Amitabh Bachchan. The two of you are standing side by side in a men's room, voiding your respective bladders.
You
Go.
actually got a scene to display that.
I can do that. So now go, you tell me the story.
Well, it so happened that I was just appointed online editor for India, and I was meant to hire about 2,000 journalists. It was the year 2000. That was when the time of the dot-com craze. So it was a big thing. All companies worldwide were rushing into it, and Reuters, of course, had a very big budget worldwide to sort of pull Reuters into the internet world. So we were setting up online desks everywhere. I was the India editor. I was before that deputy bureau chief in Mumbai. So when I got sent to Delhi, initially like all transfers that happen, your company pays for you to stay at a hotel for a month or so
Right.
until you find rented accommodation and then you move in. So I just reached and I was putting up in the Maurya Sheraton, which is in in proper Delhi, and training. The people I had recruited, uh, they were undergoing training in the conference room at the Marriott Sheraton, and I was in and out because I just would go in briefly to watch the training happening. They had sent people from London to train my new recruits, and as it happened that I left because I had worked back at the office. On the way out, I went to the men's room on the ground floor next to Bukhara, that famous restaurant.
Right.
And of course, I didn't observe. I mean, I just went in straight doing my job. And then when the pressure eased off, I looked to the left and I said, "Oh my God, this is Amitabh Bachchan." And I was so shocked. I didn't know what, I didn't say hello. And as I described it, it was quite a funny moment because I just froze there. Later on, I thought, what a fool! I should have said hello or something like
Right.
that. But before I knew it, he had sort of gone off in a grand manner and ambling out slowly after it. So
That
yeah,
was
that
your Amitabh Bachchan moment. Yeah.
I know
Um,
that moment will never come again. But I
no,
still hold my poise pissing in public.
जहां वो खड़े थे वहां लाइन शुरू हो गई थी.
अफसोस की पीछे कोई नहीं था उनके.
Your book reads like more like a series of vignettes, which give the reader the feeling that they've been allowed a limited one-day pass into your life. Why
Yeah,
that? Why that approach?
no, because I'll tell you what, I never thought of myself as a serious book writer, um, and I've never practiced long form writing. As you know, in journalism, we do
Right.
400 words, 500 words, 800, especially wire agency journalism, where I spent much of my career. Reuters, Bloomberg, Dow Jones. News wires are meant to be quick, snappy. So I've never been a long form writer. So my fear was that I would not be able to hold the reader's attention. So which is why you know, and I'm not a researcher of the academic type to hold forth at length into any one subject. So what I thought was it is more of a personal, mm, should I say, me poking fun at myself and the rest of the world.
Right.
That is what I thought would be interesting. I mean, as I go along, maybe planning other books, that approach may change. But for my first book, I wanted to keep it light and engaging, and not too pedantic, to use a rather
Right.
old-fashioned word. But yeah, that was the idea.
Yeah, but the book is all of the above. But at the same time, considering the fact that you work for two leading global news agencies, Reuters and Bloomberg, obviously you had a very wide horizon on the news business. Uh,
Yes,
I suppose there is one more book sitting from that standpoint in you.
eventually, I mean, maybe on my third book, I'll go to the news business, perhaps. Which, sorry to say, the scene in India is very tragic as far as the news business is concerned. So much so, I am sometimes ashamed to say that I used to be a journalist, for fear that people will think, oh, here comes another loud on the side of the government or on the take. But yeah, eventually. But currently, I'm working on a book on Udupi restaurants,
Right.
Indian cuisine. I mean, they are like so commonplace in Mumbai, all of India, but in Mumbai, it is.
Absolutely.
I mean, for the bulk of the majority of people, that is your sustenance. Idli, dosa, breakfast, tomato uttapam, that
Right.
kind of thing. It so happens that my family also owns a very iconic restaurant. So in Matunga, called Cafe
Hmm.
Mysore. So it was easy for me to. And in my college going days, I used to go to the restaurant because in my summer vacations, I had nothing to do, and my sister is married with a family, so my brother-in-law would take me along. He'd make me sit in the cash counter, then he'd take me to the wholesale grains market, which is then in a place called Majid Bandar, very
Right.
very congested area. And so I have some early insights into the restaurant business, and of course, um, you know I was more than a relative. He was a friend to me, Nagesh Naik, who's unfortunately passed away now. His son looks after it. His wife looked after it initially, and now the son does. So I have pretty much access to, and I thought I had myself seen a lot of it. So that is what my current book is on, and it'll take a couple of months.
I see. Are you going to look at Udupis in general to expand on the culture of Udupis? Because Mumbai is full of that.
Yes,
yeah.
it won't be just to look at it won't be a hagiography of just Cafe Mysore in a sense. Right. Cafe Mysore is, in a sense, Nagesh's grandfather, the current owner's, Nagesh's father,
I see.
Naik, is credited with starting the Udupi restaurant style of business.
I see.
The restaurant started in 1936. Sometime later, Ramanaik took it over. So in a sense, yeah, and it will dwell not just on, I would say, cuisine. It is also the transition of Mumbai from the 70s until 90s and economic liberalization and how things changed. To give you an example, which has nothing to do with the cuisine business, right? We all grew up in what are called chawls, like a train-like structure with one balcony, and great place to grow up as a child. That was like 1980s. By 1970s, 80s, suddenly the joint family system started breaking up, and people started moving. Unitary families started moving into, small apartments, self-contained with the toilet inside. Otherwise, we used to have common toilets outside. I don't know if it was Vastu, affordability, or a combination of both. So when these new apartments came in, there's a businessman called Gala. I can't remember his first name. He used to be sitting at Masjid Mandar railway station selling brooms. Okay? And all the grocers would then go to pick up, wholesale grains and household items that they would sell in their shops in the suburban. On the return, they would see this fellow, buy a broom or two from him to clean their shops and head back.
I see, yeah.
And suddenly with the explosion in these, individual apartments, the need for toilet brushes went up incredibly. So he realized that and went into it. And suddenly the demand was so much that they placed an order for a German machine to make these brushes.
I see.
I think they bought one, and then 3 months later they placed an order for a second one, and 6 months later they placed an order for another two. And these Germans got intrigued. They said, what the hell is going on? Mumbai, India, why is there such a demand? So they came and paid for a survey and realized that this is going to be a huge market. So I can't recall the name of the company, some Friedenberg or some such. They said to this family, look, we will take a stake in your company.
I see.
So you see the transition. That is also along with the time when eating out became more often. When, earlier you were joint family, it was looked down because the patriarch or matriarch would say, what the hell is going on? So that was also the time when, more women started working. So what I'm trying to say is that the book is not just about Udupi cuisine, but also how it played an important role and how it juxtaposes with changes.
That sounds fascinating. Yeah.
Across the cultures, across living standards, all that sort of thing.
Right. To change gears a bit, Uday, I know you had worked earlier in a newspaper, but predominantly your career has been, like I said, two major global news agencies, Bloomberg and Reuters. Reuters first, and then Bloomberg. Now,
I briefly also worked at Dow Jones Newswires.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. In terms of agency journalism, as we were discussing the other day, by its very nature, it tends to be very succinct, very to the point, almost shorn of any frills. it doesn't allow for long form writing at all. You come to the point, intro lead is everything, you write and you're done with it. Uh, what was your first experience when you joined Reuters from that standpoint?
It was quite challenging for me, mind you, because I remember my boss, who I also consider my mentor, Jeremy Clift. He was then bureau chief in Mumbai, who hired me, and he later on moved into management, became country manager for Reuters, and finally he went to the International Monetary Fund to become head of publications. He lives in the US now, retired, of course. But I recall that the spot reporting was easy, but then, I just reported on a major corporate event, I can't remember, and then he said, do an analysis. And yep, I could just not bring my head around what the hell, is an analysis, because, at the Times of India from where I had moved, there was nothing called analysis, because reporters did reporting and the
Right.
editors wrote the op-ed pages, you know,
Right.
and whereas this analysis was meant to be, shall I say, a lot more. You had to give a view or a counterpoint, as to what just happened. So you had to talk to, and much of the journalism, mind you, financial, because the main money for the wire agencies, not
Right.
AP, but Reuters and Bloomberg, the main money comes from trading rooms, where people bet millions of dollars each second on equities, debt,
Right.
forex, commodities. So you need to give there's no scope for bullshit, basically. Because these are fellows who are experts themselves. They have very large research rooms. So if you have to provide news to them that they will pay $2,000 a month for one screen, there is certainly no scope for.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, but one I must also say one thing about companies such as Reuters and Bloomberg. They spend a lot of money on training journalists. I mean, I've been sent to London for a year, then Hong Kong, Singapore, repeated. Almost every year. Second year, you go for 10 days. You get trained by company outsiders. You get trained by specialists, financial market specialists. So they invest a lot, and obviously, it helps them, but it helps
Right.
uh, you know
Uh,
people
since,
like
since you
people like
mentioned training, you make a particular reference to a legendary name in that space, George Short at Reuters.
right.
Uh,
Yes.
tell me about him. And while I mean, you've already mentioned Jeremy Clift, who was your bureau chief and sort of your mentor. Tell me a bit about George Short, because training is something a lot of new journalists do not even begin to understand, that there is something called training.
Yeah, I mean, until I went to Reuters, I mean, before that, I'd been in Midday, the Daily, and the Times of India. I never even remotely heard anything called training.
Right.
Training was not a concept at all. I mean, uh, in fact, Reuters, I'm sure they still have it. They have a program called Trainee Journalists Program, which is for a year where they pick, you know, uh, from around the world, they'll pick around, one each, one each. So it's a class of about 12 or 15. So I was very lucky, I mean, to get picked for this program, which had, two people from the US, one from Taiwan, two from Japan, one from England, one from, you name it. Somebody was from Turkey. So there was a German along with us. And the idea is these people would then go out, to fast track to become international correspondents. So you have so George Short is an amazing, he himself, when he joined the newspaper, I forget which one, Daily Mail or whatever it was, he was at the bottom of the pecking order, Um, you know, as he himself described it, they would send me to buy donuts, he'd say, you know, and very jocular man.
Yeah.
Um, while he was at his job, I think he went to college, got a degree, and then had some additional reporting stints. And I don't know what caused him to be appointed. I think probably, I don't know if he was the first training editor at Reuters, but certainly legendary in the sense you do a search for George Short on the internet, and you will find scores of journalists who did well themselves later on talk fondly of him. He took a lot of, and he was a great actor. I mean, he would actually act out parts, which made it so engaging
I see.
that people just wouldn't, it was not like a boring classroom where
Right.
somebody is standing and what he'd do is, as shall I say, all Brits and Indians do, he would love to drink. So at the end of the day, sometimes weekends, we would go to a pub and then he would start, recounting his anecdotes and funny incidents. I
Yeah.
remember at final farewell dinner, we went to some Chinese place. Of course, it was paid for by the company.
Hmm.
George got so, had quite a few, and finally stood on top of the table and started singing a English ballad. And the entire pub was clapping for him, not just our table. The entire
Right.
pub of Englishmen and women were clapping for him. He's quite a character, actually.
Yeah.
So,
You make a passing point about profitability in these news agencies as opposed to daily newspapers.
right.
Expand on that, because it's something that again a lot of journalists may not even have thought about. Daily newspapers versus daily news agencies.
Yeah, in fact, that is the point probably, I may touch in future, if at all I do a book on journalism, is that um, content is not valued, right? In the
Right.
sense, um, news is not valued because traditionally everybody is used to getting it free because the advertising model came in. So if you see the Times of India, I think I don't buy the paper anymore, but I think it's about 7 or 8 rupees a copy.
Mhm.
And clearly, I mean, that doesn't pay for even, probably 5% of the news gathering costs. Uh, so what happens? The rest of the money comes from advertising, which has always been the case. But in more ethical times, that was okay because I remember there was a time when the proprietor didn't dare interfere with the editor. Like when Girilal Jain was editor of the Times of India, nobody, the Jain family never intervened. Later on, somewhere around the road, things turned out where the boss could say, "Hey, I want this, I want that," and now, as you know, the government interferes. So either you are there for money, stroke power. Uh, so, in that sense, and again, I might point out that we've had this discussion while I was at Reuters also that news should be separately priced,
Hmm.
right? But the salespeople said, no, 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 you can't. How? What if they don't pay? So even at Reuters and Bloomberg, news is bundled along with a very high-end um, database. I mean, the database in a Reuters or a Bloomberg terminal, you could compare yields of, let's say, Samurai bonds versus Bundesbank German bonds for the last 15 years. In an instant, it'll give you results.
I
You
see.
can compare anything, crude versus Brent. Those analytics, uh, that humongous data, and the news are all combined together and sold. But at one stage, I remember being part of a discussion where we said, well, why don't we price news separately? But even there, it didn't fly. But nevertheless, because Reuters or Bloomberg have the ability to charge thousands of dollars, and it
Right.
is an indispensable part of trading rooms, or governments also need it for to watch international happenings. Um they have the ability to be independent. They don't have to
Right.
bow down to Narendra Modi or Donald Trump because uh, so that is what distinguishes the wire agencies. You
Right.
know,
Right.
uh,
Your agency work took you to London, Manila, and Delhi, apart from, of course, Mumbai.
correct.
It
Yes.
also gave you assignments in Singapore and Hong Kong.
Right. Right.
Describe the diversity of your experience. I know London was mainly training, but the rest you were
Right.
reporting out of.
Right. 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 No, they're quite interesting. In a sense, Manila is very much like Mumbai.
I see.
Similar culturally, more or less similar, and like Mumbai has slums, Manila has a lot of slums, but very hospitable people. But the time I went there was when there was a period of stability after Marcos, when General Ramos was president. And of course, the big difference between Manila and India, I noticed, was that the presidents or the top rulers of the country were a lot more accessible to the press. I don't know whether that was because of the American legacy. The Americans, it was an American colony for some 100
Right,
years or so.
right,
Initially a Spanish colony for some 400 years. So, which is why it is Asia's only Christian majority country,
right,
Roman Catholic.
right.
So, yeah, in a sense, we had access to the presidential plane. So, whenever he'd go into the, Malacanang Palace, or if he had to go to any of the distinct far-flung islands on the archipelago, reporters would go along. And yeah, of course, that was also a time when they had a very severe Islamic separatist issue from
Right.
the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. So, yeah, interesting times.
Yeah.
And, that was also the time when, was the time with the Asian growth story.
Indeed.
The chai balls,
The tiger economies, yeah.
Right. And Philippines, after being called the sick old man of Asia, was around that time just joining that. So
Right.
it was an interesting.
For people of our vintage, when you talk to younger journalists,
Yes,
from linotype machines where lead was molten to make printing blocks,
absolutely.
working on heavy typewriters, which practically gave you hernia to write one line. Then,
I tell you, I remember that Godrej typewriters. Even in the other newspapers also, I used them. They used to be like humongous, big monsters,
yeah,
But at the Times of India, it is especially, shall I say, very exerting, because you had the main copy to go to your Times of India Mumbai.
yeah,
Then you have second carbon copy to go to the other editions. You have a third copy to go to Maharashtra Times, a fourth copy to go to Economics Times, a sixth copy to go to Navin Times, and a seventh copy to go into the file. So can you imagine how hard you had to type? So
I'm
much
told every
that
Times of India reporter had a hammer.
you might say that.
And then you have to deal with the heavy keys, right? Because very often the keys worn out pretty quickly.
Yeah. And in fact, what would happen is that the first copy would actually, with some of the letters, like with sharp edges, like R, would tear through.
Yeah, there would be holes in all these copies, almost up to the fifth carbon copy.
Absolutely.
From that to Toshiba Tendi, because when I was with the AP, people used to
Right.
marvel at the fact that I had Toshiba Tendi. You had it too, right?
I had one too. I remember I was in some rural post office. I went there to file a report. I think I had gone for the BJP national
Okay.
meeting, which is happening somewhere. And I had to use a telegraph line. So I went to the post office and I said, expense no bar, please give me a telegraph line and you charge me whatever it is. And when they saw and they said, I put this report here and it's going to go to Mumbai now, and then it will go internationally. The entire post office came to a standstill, plus all the shops around came to a stop. They all came to look at this wonder,
Toshiba Tendi, which eventually became the laptop that we use now.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
It
No,
predated the laptop.
it was quite, I mean, we've seen quite a transformation from that to what we have now.
No, I remember even the drum picture transmitters that you have. Now I
Right.
can do it with my mobile phone. I can send pictures anyway. But
Right.
I mean, so one of the shall I say advantages of working for these very international companies is that you are also at the forefront of technology.
Exactly.
I mean, I remember, I was in Ahmedabad covering the communal riots with you,
Right.
and I had to go to the local, telegraph office and book a trunk call, and a noisy trunk call, which the fellow at the other end struggled to, hear me out. And what a change it was.
How times have changed, indeed.
Oh yes, absolutely.
You write that your nearly 10 years at Reuters
Right.
was most memorable.
Yes.
Tell me about it. Why you say that?
Because that was a time of very rapid growth for me.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, um, after London, I came back. I was quickly sent to Manila. And from Manila, I came back as deputy bureau chief to Mumbai. And Mumbai was a fairly large bureau there.
Right.
So the work was pretty intense and enjoyable too, and much appreciated internationally because India by then, the markets had become the darling of international investors. So, we used to have a lot of senior editors coming in, and yeah, it was uh, very hard work, but very engaging.
Yeah.
You know, so
You know, the Indian economy had sort of begun to open up by 84, 85 under Rajiv Gandhi somewhat, and then it picked up pace in 92 under
correct.
Narasimha Rao and Manmohan Singh. As a financial service, Reuters being predominantly that, or Bloomberg or Dow Jones, all of them are financial services. How did you approach that period, and how do you look back after nearly 30 years now?
Well, I think it's a. I mean, first of all, it's an essential. You know, uh, I mean, that kind of news is something that really is the blood of financial markets. Uh, you know, Financial markets depend upon that quite a bit.
Right.
Um, Now it's almost part of, like, you can't do without a Bloomberg or a Reuters if you're in a, you know. But I must also tell you one thing. When I first joined Reuters in '93, a couple of months after um, the economy opened up,
Right.
Reuters previously had a bureau in Mumbai uh, that shut down after independence because previously they wanted to report on cotton dispatches coming from Gujarat into Bombay
Right.
port and into the mills of Lancashire. After independence, when the Indian markets closed, there was nothing to report, so they only had a bureau in Delhi to report war, famine, and disaster. But when liberalization happened, they said, "Hey, now is the time to, we need to a presence again because foreign investors can now invest in Indian debt and equities."
Right.
So when Jeremy Clift was appointed here, I was the first reporter to be hired. So
I
I
see.
was among the first Indian reporter to cover Indian stock markets for foreign audience.
I see.
Because the others, Bloomberg had not yet come in, and AP is not really into financial.
No, it wasn't. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I mean, you were already present there for Associated Press, for the American Associated Press. So I recall in the early days, we even the Bombay Stock Exchange still relied on facts
Hmm.
of price sensitive information coming in, and all the brokers cabal, who are now big brokers, of course, they're billionaires, but they would read all the messages, do their trade, then put it on the notice board.
Insider trading, classic insider trading,
Absolutely. I mean,
and in your face insider trading.
blatant insider trading. So,
Imagine like you said, how brazen it was.
sorry, say that again.
How brazen it was, I said.
Yeah, absolutely brazen. And it is only when the foreign investors started coming in, because when they came in for visits, and then they would come and talk to me, and I'd say, "This is going on." So then they complained to the finance ministry.
Right.
And then that is when the finance ministry set up SEBI.
Right.
So the formation of SEBI is an aftermath to foreign investors saying, "What the hell is going on?"
Yeah, then in those few minutes, they would have made so much money.
Oh yes, because you know they they would have already bought, because foreign investors now started queuing up, and in there have a. I mean, you can actually make a lot of money even seconds. But
Right.
those days they had a 5 minute advantage. You can imagine.
Absolutely. I mean, you're
You know,
sitting on privileged information.
right? Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
No, these little details, a lot of people don't realize how things have changed.
Oh yes, phenomenally,
Yeah.
quite so.
No, I'm so glad you wrote it, Uday. I'm hoping that you would write a bigger one on news agency journalism, as you mentioned, because there is a lot to write there. And you
Yes, in
have an
fact,
insider.
I'll tell you, I must thank you for putting this idea in my head, because I don't think I would have thought about it. Probably because what happens is, when you've done something for too long, you don't give it too much importance.
Right.
you become cynical, not cynical, but you say, yes, no, sabko pata hai.
हाँ, but सबको पता नहीं है.
Right? So you pointed it out to me,
Both, I mean, all agencies have their style books, for instance.
Yes, of course, of course.
AP is, of course, famous worldwide.
Right.
I mean, America uses the AP style book still.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
a lot of newspapers still stick to it. I'm sure Reuters has a very different kind because it's a financial service. So you have a very different approach to it.
Yeah, no, but our style book was because Reuters also covers general news, in the sense,
Yeah.
the Iraq War. Or,
Right. That's true. I mean, you're both very powerful divisions. That's true.
Yes. So the style book had to not just financial, but also on general news, how to describe, um, you know. In fact, in Reuters, for our general news reporters, we had a hostile environment training course
I
where
see.
former commanders in the British elite forces, they would train journalists on how to uh, handle living in war-torn areas. Um, simple things like if you are going down a road and you find shots being fired at you, that your typical instinct would be to go to the bush on the opposite side. So these fellows advise you saying, no, jump on the side of the bush, because they're not aiming at you, they're aiming at somebody else. But if you're going on the other side,
Right.
you're likely to get shot.
Yeah.
Or like when going in a hostile area, always carry cartons of cigarettes, because if you're caught by somebody, cigarettes packets can get you away.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or if you stop, let us say, to take pictures along a particularly dangerous spot, leave your car on and the door slightly ajar, so you sense danger, you quickly get in
and then get away. Yeah.
In fact, part of that hostile environment training course is where these fellows actually blindfold you and kidnap you.
I see. So they're really enacted for you.
They kick you to for good measure. To tell you that this is how you deal with it.
Yeah. Do you lead a retired life, or you continue to dabble in journalism still?
No. I am retired from journalism entirely.
Okay.
So, but now, I'm glad I came out. By the way, this transition also into this book took me a long time. So I was, generally writing for pleasure, in the sense putting posts here and there.
Right.
Until some people read my post, friends, of course, that said, "Hey, why don't you put this together? It's interesting." So, so I took some of what I had already put on Facebook and LinkedIn and added, about 70-80% more, all from memory.
I mean, that's the best way to do it. It flows well then.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think people don't realize, those who are trained in old school like you and I, facts have really embedded them. So you automatically recall things without trying.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
There are so many stories to tell.
Oh, yeah. And, I distinctly remember each, the atmosphere, that sort of thing. Because, we made a living out of, conveying in words what
exactly.
we saw. So, in a sense, it's become second habit.
One of the instructions that I used to get while I was at the AP was the word color. We need more color.
Right.
Right? Color was very crucial.
I remember George Short saying.
Yeah.
And, like I said, he was quite dramatic in his training class. So he'd say, write the news here. Then you follow it up with paragraph 2 justifying or so backing up that claim.
Right.
Then a dab of color here, a dab of color there, and it starts to sing, That's,
AP, I don't know if Reuters had it, but in those days, the AP had what's known as the Death Watch.
yes.
I remember I was covering the Pope's visit. I think Pope John Paul II. He was in Bombay. And I was, of course, deployed, since I was the bureau chief in Bombay. I had to be at the airport till such time as the plane acquired a certain elevation. And that was known as Death Watch. In case something happened and it crashed, then you are at hand to report. It was, I mean, these, I don't know, maybe it still exists in the agencies.
I'm sure it does
Yeah,
because, and that point in time, the Catholic Church was still pretty powerful. It is
right.
still, but still nowhere close to what it used to be.
Indeed.
And what happened
Indeed.
was Pope John Paul II, just a month before he could visit India, a Turkish fellow called Mehmet Agca had shot at him
Absolutely.
from the balcony at St. Peter's.
Yeah.
So clearly there was, I remember, I wasn't with Reuters then, I was with Midday newspaper, but American Broadcasting Corporation, RAI, the Italian television channel, and one third channel whose name I forget, because death watches are pretty expensive,
They are.
You need a battery of cameramen to be watching his every move.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So these three TV channels came together, and now they had come with they set up an editing suite at the Oberoi. They took about 5-6 rooms and converted it into a editing suite. Now they had dozens of cameramen going. Now let's say Shivaji Park, for instance, they probably had 6 cameramen at various angles. So if something
Right.
happened, but those were pre-internet days, so they needed local journalists with accreditation card, government cards, which those days allowed
Yeah.
you access to any VIP. Now even that doesn't work. Now you need special permission for each. But I
Right.
had that government accreditation card, and more importantly, I had a motorbike.
Yes.
So I was one of the people hired, biker journalists, basically a courier boy, and I was given a walkie-talkie
Okay.
that connected me to the editorial control room at Oberoi. My job was only to be at Shivaji Park, keep my walkie-talkie on, and if the unfortunate happened, they would just tell me the cameraman who had the best shot of it would I would be conveyed that cameraman Fabrizio or whoever is waiting at this, go there, collect the tape, get on your bike, rush back to Oberoi Hotel.
I see.
Right, and they paid richly. I mean, I think
Yeah,
my
yeah,
monthly
they
my
paid very well. In
yeah, my
agencies paid
monthly
very well in those days.
my monthly salary was 3,000 rupees. They paid me 3,000 rupees per day for 4 days.
Absolutely.
In
No,
fact,
it was
I recall going to St. Pius Seminary, which is the academy for training Catholic priests,
right.
because he was visiting there, and I went on my bike, and a whole lot of, and on my bike I had ABC News, and I had a walkie-talkie, and one of those medallions.
Yeah.
So the cops thought I was part of the papal entourage because nobody stopped me, and I just went in, and there I am in a private audience with the Pope. Of course, that was possible then, but not anymore.
Those are fun days.